everybody. I think everybody's had a chance to get through the buffet line. Please help yourself. There looks to be plenty left over. I want to thank everybody for being here this morning. A little unusual to have a board meeting in the AM, not lunch hour. But we do have a special treat for United Way today. We are fortunate to have Mr. Brian Gallagher here with us. As you all know, he is the CEO of United Way Worldwide, and we've got a full day of events for Brian. Hopefully some of y'all will be attending the lunch at the Foundry later today at 12. So I'd like to get started to have us introduce ourselves to Brian. I'd ask if the staff would hold off until your meeting later today, because you will have a private session with Brian in about 10 o'clock, I think. But if the rest of us would introduce ourselves, just tell a little bit about who you work for, and maybe a little about your connection with United Way. So with that, I'm going to start here with the incoming board chair, Mr. Joe Lansman. Thanks.
I'm Joe Lansman. I'm the president and CEO of the University of Tennessee Medical Center. A couple of years ago, did the chair of the campaign, and I've been asked and blessed and honored to be asked to be chair starting next year.
Randy?
I'm Randy Boyd, campaign chair for this year, and the dog vet salesman. I have a company that makes the invisible fences for dogs.
Jason?
Jason Wool, and I work for Ridge Consulting Group. And I've been involved in public service pretty much my whole life. I mean, it was just expected that would happen. My mom's been a big supporter of United Way and still is. She's one of the member agencies now, just an agency. And I'm happy to serve.
Hey, I'm Heather Fielden. I'm with First People's Bank, and I've been involved with United Way for several years with OBI and
Becky Dodson, Tanoga Healthcare, and been involved for probably about 25 years on and off.
Good morning, I'm Becky Thompson. I work for the University of Tennessee Medical Center. I've been on the board a few years, and I've worked with the Brain and Massachusetts.
Good morning, I'm Rosalind Tillman. I'm the immediate past board chair, and I've been with United Way for at least the last 15 years, I think.
Good morning, I'm Chris Fuller from the athletic department at the University of Tennessee. I've been fortunate to participate with United Way and be part of the board for the last several years, and it's been a pleasure to work with this group.
Good morning, Brian. I'm Larry Kleinman. I'm the Executive Vice President of HR for Covenant Health, and have been with this board, I think, about 3.5 years now.
Tiffany Carpenter with the University of Tennessee System, and I chair the Brain and Massachusetts.
Good morning, I'm Christy Altman, and I work for myself with the Public Relations and Communications firm. And I am new to the board and serving on the branding.
Good morning, I'm Jack Hornby, U.S. Cellular, and I've been on the board for a year now.
You?
Hello, Mr. Gallagher. I'm Suzanne Coyle. I am the chair of the Labor Participating Committee, and I have been with United Way however long me and Sissy's been here.
We're not the same.
That's why I decided why I'm interested.
I'm Kimberly Mitchell. I'm with the Atomic Trades and Labor Council at CNS Fly 12. This is my first year being on the board, so I'm very good at this.
I'm Anthony Mulder. I'm also with Atomic Trades and Labor out of Oak Ridge, Tennessee. CNS now Y12. And I'm the chief steward for outside machinists, which in the normal world is the millwright.
Okay, I don't have my contacts. You all are all blurry to me. I can't see anything. Somebody help me out.
I'm Millie Hodge with PricewaterhouseCoopers. I've been involved with United Way for a number of years, and this is my second year on the board.
Good morning, my name is Brandon Sparks, and I work for ING, and we're amongst the United Way staff. I don't know if they're worried about us. It's my first year on the board, and I'm chairing the Young Leaders Society.
Bruce, I hate to interrupt your breakfast.
Okay, I'm Bruce Foster. I'm a lawyer and serve as pro bono general counsel for this United Way.
I'm Suzanne Sutherland. I run a management consulting company that works with governments. I've been with United Way for about 5 years.
Jill Green, my business partner, and I have a recruiting consulting firm, and I was
self-employed CPA, and of course, I'm actual treasurer, so.
He has so much free time. Great, thank you all. You know, we've designed this special session of our board meeting to hear some introductory comments from Brian, and then we're going to open up this for questions. And I know you've been getting emails from me about being prepared to ask questions, and I told Brian, I said, if I hear crickets, I'm going to start pointing at people. And as I said, I don't have my contacts in, I can't see you. But I'm just going to point at somebody, you better be prepared to ask a question. I have a feeling you all have plenty for him, and I told him to be prepared. I want to introduce you to our guest of honor today. Brian Gallagher is the President and Chief Executive Officer of United Way Worldwide. It's the world's largest privately funded nonprofit. Under his leadership, United Way has shifted the focus of its mission to driving community change. Brian came to United Way in 1981 as a management trainee and has held positions in several communities throughout the U.S., including Reading, Pennsylvania, Providence, Rhode Island, Atlanta, Georgia, and is president of the United Way of Central Ohio and Columbus. In 2002, he took on the role of president and CEO of United Way of America. In 2009, under Brian's leadership, United Way of America and United Way International merged to create United Way Worldwide. 4 years later, nearly 1,800 United Ways are engaged in community impact work, in education, financial stability, and health. With more than 2.8 million volunteers and 9.7 million donors worldwide, and $5.3 billion raised every year, United Way is the world's largest privately funded nonprofit. Will you help me welcome Mr. Brian Gallagher?
Thanks, Tommy, and good morning, everyone. Good morning. It's great to be here, and it's to try to promote, you know, Tommy's push of you to ask questions, and I'd really rather have a dialogue than make a long speech. Noontime is the speech. This morning, from my perspective, is conversation. So I've got a few thoughts on cards that I want to share with you. Then I'm going to come out from behind this podium and talk about what you want to talk about. First, Tommy, thank you for your leadership, and Joe, thank you for your past leadership, and maybe the most welcome title in the room, immediate past chair. I've had a couple of those now; they feel pretty good. Appreciate your leadership, your time, getting up early to have a board meeting. Everything that the staff and the volunteer leadership have done to get this day ready. It is a full day, and I'm really looking forward to it. I spent 20 years in local United Ways, and now in my 13th year at United Way of America and United Way Worldwide, and the thing I miss most is being a part of a local community. And so coming back into a community, especially with a United Way that has this rich a history and is as well thought of as United Way of Greater Knoxville, is a pleasure to be here. And a special thank you to my friend Ben Landers, who, Ben and I are contemporaries, so however long you've been here, we're about the same. And I think Ben was at United Way of America when I came into United Way, or went to United Way of America, you know, shortly thereafter. And so we've kind of worked our career over these last 30 years. And Ben, thank you for your leadership. Glad you, not all United Way folks land in a spot that they love and raise their family there and get to lead a great United Way. So congratulations and thanks. Let me just, you know, as I said, the lunch is formal remarks, and so I want to share some of the content that I'm going to share at lunch, but I'd rather do it with in the context of you as partners, because you know, the thing about growing up in United Way is that I am not unclear about how we create value in United Way. I was saying to Ben, I love the look of the room. We are a mission-centered, purpose-driven organization, and when we remember that, great things are possible. And when we drift from that, lots of bad things are possible, or at least lack of real value creation is possible. So let me go from there in terms of talking about who we are, in my view, as an organization, our mission, our purpose, our value, But then one of the things about United Way, unlike, I would say, most nonprofit organizations, is that you need a business model. You need to turn it into money and volunteers and support. And you have to do it every day. You have to do it every year. I remember when I went to Atlanta, I grew up as a campaign director in United Way raising money, even though I was a social work major and a social work grad. And when UPS moved their headquarters to Atlanta, Oz Nelson, who was the chairman of UPS at the time, was the campaign chair, maybe it was the board chair. And I was, the grind of an annual campaign is when you do it every year. When you're the campaign director, you feel like, oh my God, this is Groundhog Day again. And I said to Oz, we should go to multi-year gifts in terms of workplace payroll deduction, so it always keeps happening. And he looks at me and says, Brian, no, it's important to earn it every year. And what's interesting about that is that's who we are. So we're about social change, community impact, trying to advance the common good in community, but we have to go into the marketplace. We have to go ask folks to be a part of that. And so that's the context that I want to start with. Just so you know, this is my 32nd or 33rd year in United Way. I'm a social work grad from Ball State in Muncie, Indiana. Quite honestly, I applied for 3 internships when I came out of school in 1981. The United Way of America internship program, the Sears internship program, and the JCPenney's internship program, and I was prepared to say yes to any one of them. And I got into this program. I went to Winston-Salem, North Carolina, learned United Way in Winston. It was a great town, still is a great town. Met my wife in Winston, which is a good thing. Went to Reading, went to Providence, went to Atlanta. Went to Columbus, Ohio as the CEO, leaving Atlanta as the Chief Operating Officer, and in that journey, got my MBA at Emory. And I did it very consciously, and I've talked to a lot of young people about, the education track that makes sense within United Way, and there's a lot of nonprofit management tracks now, and some are very good, and I think some are not. Those that I think are really effective are those that don't back off kind of the hard skills you need in running a nonprofit organization: finance, accounting, strategy. Those that I think are, this service is too much but not as effective, soften those things and kind of group them into larger disciplines and so forth. And so I say all that to say I come at this as a social worker first and an MBA second, but I see the two together. And as a board, you struggle with both of those. You struggle with, are they member agencies? Are they partner agencies? Is it funding the operations of great nonprofits? Or is it trying to create change at a community level? Are we focused on homelessness? Are we focused on education? Or is it really making sure that there's enough agencies that are sufficiently supported in order to do their work? And then on the market side, is this all a business-to-business model? Is it our relationship with corporations and then their employees, and it's payroll deduction in the workplace, and is that the business model going forward? What about folks who don't work for companies that that we don't have a relationship with? What about millennials? What about social media? What about the disruption in the market? So we have to come at it from both perspectives. We are 130 years old, 127 years old. And I say that to say that, and I'll say it at lunch today, in my view, just in terms of reading history in my own 30 plus years, we are in a very disruptive time. Economically, politically, socially, it is disruptive. You can argue, I think, around the edges, but in terms of the economic shift that's going on in the US and the world, the movement of people around the world, the change in terms of how money is earned, how it's spread, who gets it, the jobs that create it, the jobs that don't get created, what has to happen in terms of job training, what's the role of education today. It's just, meeting with leaders in organized labor this morning, what's the role of organized labor? There's so many parallels in terms of United Way, but we live in a disruptive time. The good news is that United Way is designed to try to figure out those times. If you look at this room, and if you look at, I think, as I looked at the list for lunch, what goes around comes around. The only way, I think, communities can figure out fast-changing, disruptive times is to pull together, is to honestly, genuinely have different interests at the table with a pragmatic vision. Not lofty goals, not political goals, but how is it that we actually do try to advance the common good for everybody in the community? Because for sure, there's no sustainable long-term economic success without human success. And we're at a time where we're struggling to figure out how those go together. And every time I say that is not a political statement. We tend to politicize things a lot, but that's not a political statement. The magic of United Way and over our history is being able to help communities establish a vision and a set of goals that are in the best interest of community. And then helping communities define the most valuable roles that each one of us can play. What's the role of business? What's the role of the nonprofits? What role is government playing? And especially in disruptive times. We started as an association of emerging nonprofits, religious leaders, business leaders, and labor leaders in response to first the gold rush in the West and then the industrialization of America. It was a huge economic transformation. There really was no helping profession. You had millions of people across the US moving to different parts of the country, mostly in cities, a lot of south to north, a lot of east to west, and you had concentration of people looking for economic opportunity that created social change at such a scale that we had to organize differently for. We had to organize for it. And it was, so if you go back, the 5 United Ways I worked at, if you go back and read the history of those United Ways and find board minutes and newspaper articles and so forth, when you get back into the 30s, 40s, and 50s, if it went back that far, and then they were referencing the previous organizations, it always was something like the Association of such and such charities. And it was a planning organization. We started as a planning organization. World War I created war chests, which was this idea that you would, as a community, create relief effort to respond to needs and raise money together. War chests were turned into community chests. The idea, this fundraising federation for nonprofit agencies was a product of World War I that succeeded very, very well in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and so forth. We kind of toggle back and forth between, are we a community impact organization, are we a fundraising organization? And there's always been that tension in United Way. Some United Ways, maybe this one included, had planning organizations that were separate than the fundraising organization. In the 1950s, payroll deduction in the workplace was negotiated between the UAW and the automakers in Flint and in Detroit. That set fundraising on a skyrocket up in United Way. United funds were created across the country. We had Red Cross was a big fundraiser, United Defense Councils were a big fundraiser, United Funds were a big fundraiser, and they were called different things, but workplace payroll deduction was this wildly innovative approach in a disruptive time in America. And it sent United Way on this fundraising rocket ship, and we defined ourselves as a fundraiser. We created United Way in 1970. We were all different things at that point, so we kind of nationalized United Way, if you will. One brand, one mission by and large. We professionalized the movement. You know, Ben was a part of that HR group at United Way of America that focused on people like me. You know, who do we recruit off of college campuses, put them in a training program, get them moving along? What should people get paid? You know, what does professional development look like? So in that period of time, 70s, 80s, and I'm moving toward today in terms of strategy, and I think now what we're faced with, there are challenges for sure, but the opportunities, is that especially in the 80s, when I came in Winston-Salem, I just have to say it this directly, you know, the living was easy and the money was easy. RJR Tobacco, Piedmont Airlines, Wachovia Bank, Western Electric, you know, you ran campaigns, everybody loved you. There was no competition to speak of. It was all paper-based. I remember the first pledge card in United Way I ever worked with. It was a paper card. Thank God, I'd seen an IBM punch card, but this is a paper card, and it had in the upper left-hand corner a box that said "My Fair Share" or other signature. That was the card. And you could go into a meeting like this at RJR or Wachovia or whatever, and I would know, because I was trained as a management trainee in fundraising, that if 80% of you were to check My Fair Share and drop it in a box, and folks would go through the box afterwards, we could calculate how much we'd raised that day by knowing your pay band. And so, so that's how I came into United Way. In the 80s and 90s, competition, technology, globalization, changed economic landscape, and this monopoly in the workplace was over. And we've been struggling with it ever since, to be honest. We can't, the reason we can't be a fundraising federation like we were is because it doesn't add enough value. You know, I remember as early as Rhode Island, for sure, in the 80s, emerging, competing federation of other agencies. United Health agencies, empowerment agencies, Women's Way, environmental agencies. So this idea that you could be a federation of agencies that was so good, so different than everybody else, that it would add value and differentiate you in the marketplace was changing. At the same time, technology was allowing people to designate their gift. And what more importantly, I think, we were now starting to move to a consumer-based, individual-based economy that we currently live in, but it was happening in the 80s and 90s. So you had the competition growing, you had technology that allowed individuals to say, well, you know, I want to give to that agency, I want to support that agency, and because of that pressure, lots of United Ways, not so much this one in regards to donor choice, but certainly in New York, Philadelphia, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, big cities around the country, and not so big cities, created open donor choice. And it was a response to competition and pressure to, there must be a different way, but the point is, we started thinking of ourselves as a fundraising organization. Our mission is fundraising, therefore, we will do what we have to do to keep, and had the mindset of a monopolist, and therefore we were trying to keep competition out or buy competition. Partnerships with American Cancer Society, American Heart, so forth, that's a monopolist thinking, versus a value-based organization trying to figure out what's the greatest value that we can create for donors. All of that to be said, where we find ourselves is, and have, since I've been in this job over the last 12 or 13 years, and quite honestly, the 10 years before that, local United Ways, as always, figure out and innovate. Marketplace, community change, social change, and so forth. And we then, at United Way of America and United Way Worldwide, watch it. We have this press box view of United Way. We watch what's happening, who's effective, who's responding to change most effectively, how do you codify it, how do you scale it, how do you spread it. That's the way that we think about our work at United Way Worldwide. There are times that there are enterprise level relationships with corporations and government partners and so forth, but that's by and large how we think about it. So the choices, I think, were stay a fundraising federation and add great nonprofits to your package, and so there's no end to the game. I don't know how many nonprofits there are in Knox County. You can't fund them all, right? You can position yourself as a fundraising organization and say, we exist to try to raise as much money as possible for the best agencies, and that can be, you know, a funding relationship with some, it can be donor designated in other cases, it can be pools, it can be, to me, that doesn't really, the evidence I think is pretty compelling, it doesn't raise more money. It distributes money differently. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's, and we, as United Way, if we now just think of United Way as an institution, you get commoditized in that model. You know, we'll move your money from point A to point B to your favorite agency 12% is way too much for that. Folks question whether you should be in the middle of that transaction at all. So there's nothing, in my view, in my experience, there's nothing wrong with being the middleman in a transaction if you add value. And so this idea of impact, improving people's lives, leveraging an investment, whether it's time or money, is our differentiator. What makes us different is our willingness to take on social and economic issues at scale in community. And our point of view and our differentiator, I think, is the diversity of our relationships. Our ability to respond to school readiness, high school graduation, homelessness, access to health care in a diverse, complex model that lets everybody be a part of the process. So that's the community impact model, improving people's, you know, the worldwide mission statement is to improve people's lives by mobilizing the caring power of communities around the world. In my view, and I see it in your mission statement, a mission statement should do three things. Say what you do, improve people's lives, how you do it that makes you different, mobilizing interest in a community, different interests in a community, and for whom you do it at a community level. That's what we believe is differentiated. And that's the path we've been on over the last 15 years. Different United Ways are at different stages of that. When I was in Columbus, in Ben's job in Columbus, Ohio, I'll share this quick example and then finish with 5 key initiatives at an enterprise level and stop and open it up. It was the mid-1990s. The economy was doing great. You may remember the macroeconomy in the US was fine, growing, and the number of people, number of families going into homeless shelters in Columbus was on a steady rise. Economy's improving, jobs being created, more people in shelters, more families in shelters. We can have the conversation about that, why, but we had one of the best shelter systems anywhere, we thought. Cooperation between government and business and nonprofits, and the debate in Columbus was whether we should build another family shelter or 2. And we at United Way, we're in the conversation you're in right now. Are these member agencies? Are they partner agencies? What do we mean by outcomes? Are we talking at a community level? What's the definition of success? And we, at the time that was happening, that community debate was happening, had made the decision that we were going to focus, that success was housing. That success was not shelters. I can still, just to personalize it, I can still remember on an agency visit early in my time in Columbus. I was at a YWCA shelter, and it was a family shelter, and we were in this housing conversation at the board. And I remember asking the executive, so where do the kids go to school? And middle school and elementary school, and it was clearly a neighborhood you did not want kids walking through on their own. And I said, well, how do they get there? The bus picks them up. The shelter was a bus stop. I remember thinking, growing up, you knew where kids came from. The kids that you went to school with, you knew where they came from. You knew where they lived, you knew whether they owned a home or not, you knew whether they were in an apartment, you knew whether they were in public housing, you knew if their parents were together, you knew all that. And we had institutionalized shelter so much that we had rerouted school buses to pick kids up at shelters. And so, definition of success in this model is housing. Safe, decent, affordable housing first. And so we took that path. And we had great relationships with member agencies and partner agencies, but what we decided, we said to public officials and we said to corporations, we're not in on building another shelter. We're in on housing families first. And around the country was this emerging new model, housing first, where the idea was, the frame was, get these families into an apartment and then force the nonprofit and social services to support them in their home. Versus what we were doing, what we certainly at United Way were doing, which was making families go get behind our doors get behind our nonprofit doors. Instead, we were saying, we're gonna come to your door. And in Columbus and across the country, it's been wildly successful. Like everything that you're wrestling with, it's got a great return. It takes some investment and it takes some time, and we are a short-term culture. But we have to keep, I think, on that path. Last thing. Here are very quickly, because I want to use these, anything I've said that you want to talk about, I'm happy to talk about, but these 5 as forward-looking, where we headed, therefore, what are the challenges, what are the opportunities that hopefully you hear in these 5 things. And these are local, these are national, these are global. And I haven't talked anything about global. We can do that in the Q&A, we can do that in the Q&A. Ben and I, in my view, I hate to say this in front of your board, but Ben and I get paid to think 5 years out. If we're not doing it, no one else is, really. And so these are about where we going in 5 to 10 years. We need first a single business model. We're struggling with, as a United Way enterprise, groups of local United Ways, how do you actually raise money in this community impact model? You know, I got how you raise money in the Fundraising Federation. You go out and say, here are our agencies, they're great, we'll tour you through the agencies, and it's an efficient model, price is good. So a model, not to tell every local United Way what to do, we'll always be an independent group of local United Ways in a movement and sharing a brand. But let's be clear about what is successful. A business model to me is something that generates revenue that allows you to do the work that you're in business to do. That's a business model. And so we need to be clear about what ours is, and we've spent a lot of time on that. 2, even though giving in the US has been inching up, absent the 2-year Great Recession, but inching up at 2 to 3% a year, we're doing it with fewer donors. Fewer donors in big workplaces. We are increasingly a world of individual consumers, even if they're in our biggest employers. Our biggest employers, as you know, struggle with loyalty and retention and so forth, because this is, to make the point, it's not quite this dramatic. They're independent contractors, you know, or the relationship between employer and employee is different. And our model is business to business. We don't know the names of most of our employees, or our donors. So we need an individual engagement strategy. We need to know the men and women inside of these companies. We need to be creating relationships with them. We need to be focused on their aspiration. The company will succeed if we succeed helping them do that. And there are lots of strategies that we're working around that. The corporate partners that we've had for 10, 15, 20, 30 years, those are going to have to get much more strategic. You know, what is it that the business is trying to achieve? I'll give you an example. We, as much as this, again, this is, remember, we're thinking out. United Way needs to be part of economic development strategy. Needs to be part of job creation thinking. Needs to be part of, you know, so we think about it as workforce development. I think about it, we think about it as jobs and economic growth and sustainable economic growth. And so there's a whole set of work we're doing in terms of how we get more strategic with those corporations. 4th is we're going to create at United Way Worldwide a $10 million individual giving society. And we're going to do that for a couple of reasons. First, there are 25 people, so this is $10 million in somebody's lifetime. Just like the $1 Million Roundtable is $1 million in somebody's lifetime, or over 10 years, or whatever our criteria is. There are 25 people in the US right now who have given $10 million or more to United Way. So the market's already going there, or just over a lifetime, and now that over the last 10 or 15 years we've had $1 million donors who've done multiple gifts and so forth. So one is, we need to create a recognition and a giving society just like Alexis and Tocqueville at that level. Secondly, others are getting those level of gifts. And by the way, so I should know this, but I gotta believe that the last UT multi-year campaign is in the billions, not in the hundreds of millions, which is fantastic. What we have to do at United Way is say the threshold for giving to human services is this. Education, absolutely. Arts, health, absolutely. When we set $10,000 as a giving level in United Way, I remember the gasp that went up in, I forget where I was, I must have been in Rhode Island, I guess. Yeah, $10,000. And then then what happens, you create a culture that said, you know, you should give to human services at that level. And then when the $1 Million Roundtable came along, people had the same kind of sense. Our view is that the time is right for that number. It's not right for everybody, and it's not a strategy to try to force all giving levels, but it raises the bar. And it therefore pulls everything on. The expectation of giving to human services. I have a small tangent on this one. I had the great privilege of being in a small group at the New York City Public Library when Warren Buffett signed the papers giving the $30 billion to the Gates Foundation. And we got this opportunity to ask questions and so forth. So I asked a question of Bill Gates, who's been very involved with us. And in his answer, he took the opportunity to talk about giving generally. And he said, you know, my view and my parents' view was the first giving you should do is to human services and human development, basic human services. Once you're done with that, then you should think about what are the other things that you want to do. That's all we're thinking about in this $10 million giving society. And then finally, the last one, last initiative is to create what we're calling a partnership group. You know, the idea is, again, I'll say it this way, I'm a product of United Way. I grew up in board rooms like this, board discussions like this, communities like this, and it's always dangerous to compare communities, but as I thought about coming to Knoxville today, I thought mostly about Winston-Salem and my time in Winston and how much I learned there and what it felt to be a part of that community. Reading's the same way, Providence the same way. So we'll always be, as long as I'm in this job, a organization made up of independent local United Ways that take a brand and a mission and a value proposition and make it live on the ground. But we are best when we're connected. We are best when we're connected. That's true around brand, marketing, relationship management, and increasingly it's going to be around business operations as well. Please don't hear this as a centralization tactic or strategy. We have 1,800 local United Ways in the U.S. We have 1,100 in the world. We have 1,140 in the U.S. There are United Ways that are staffed, at least one professional, 700 or 800, maybe 900. Every one of them, almost, is vertically integrated from a business perspective, doing everything. I get the fact that East Tennessee may be a little different because you, by the way, if you don't know this, very cooperative and not always my experience when I go into other regions around the country, that everybody's getting along. But mostly integrated. You know, we run the campaign, we do allocations, we have our finance committee, we have our IT function, we have an HR function, we have our benefits plan, we do our audit, we have our own email, every one of them. And we're going to put together a group to take a look at that. When I first came in, having had some of this experience in Columbus, creating a shared services group with Cincinnati and some others, we could, at an enterprise level, we could reinvest tens of millions of dollars per year in the U.S. if we were to take non-mission centered activity and reinvest it into mission centered activity. It doesn't work unless you get some scale. It doesn't matter that United Way Worldwide or Gallagher thinks it's a good idea. There has to be some consensus within United Way that we want to do that at scale, because you have to get some scale in order for United Ways individually to benefit. So that's the last one. Let me stop there. I know it's a little longer than we planned, but it still should have 20 or 25 minutes. And go first, because I know you're leaving.
Yeah, I'm sorry to jump in, but I didn't take off. I told him that if I leave at 8:30, it's not because of something he said. But, actually, maybe 3, possibly 4 questions. And maybe Ben might have briefed you on some of the things that we're trying to do this year. But we've set our target this year at $13 million, up from $12 million, which is only an 8% increase. But knowing the $12 million was pretty difficult to get last year, so it's a fairly ambitious goal. So we're going to try some things we haven't done in the past. So I'm curious your reaction to some of the things that we're doing. And I don't think they're unique, but I'm curious what your thoughts are with their effectiveness. The first is, we've got 20 of our top donors to donate all the operating costs, which allows us then to be able to go to everyone else in the community and say every single penny that you donate goes 100% to the agencies.
Yeah.
So there's no overhead cost.
Yeah.
And the second thing we're doing, which we borrowed from other agencies, is the transformational fund to raise some capital for a single one-time project. So over and above your normal operating costs, you make a single donation to get this one transformational project done.
Yep.
Doing those two things, especially I guess the first thing, it kind of changes the way I think that we can talk to potential donors about, since there's no additional cost. This is something we've had a little bit of debate on. Ben suggested that maybe I ask your view on this. So if there's no transaction cost to the donor, and then as long as we can continue to increase our allocable dollars that we have to allocate, is there any downside to increasing the designated, I think you used the term donor choice?
Yeah, yeah.
Is there any downside to doing that? And you asked kind of, or maybe suggested, the real question is, are you providing value?
Correct.
So just thinking out
Correct.
loud,
Correct.
maybe 3 values. To the donor, if I'm a donor, writing 1 check versus 20, it's a benefit to me that United Way is my place to make a difference.
Yeah.
To the community, the thing that I've experienced with my campaign is being able to see that United Way is able to force collaboration with the agencies, which as a single donor you can't do. So there's value to the community.
Yeah.
And thirdly, it's value to the agencies by being able to just market more effectively to broader constituencies. Maybe you provide value there. So there's a lot of stuff in one question. They're kind of curious. Maybe you'll ask
This is the man out talking in the market every day.
I'm the sales guy. But then the last one, I guess, if all those things are kind of okay ideas, but there's a really big one out there that we're missing, we'd love to know what that is.
Thank you. It's actually a great question. It's a thoughtful framing of the question. Again, I grew up a fundraiser and was the campaign director in 12 or 13 United Way annual campaigns where I staffed you, and then was an executive for 6 more or 8 more, whatever, by the time I got to United Way of America. Here's the thing I learned about campaigning in United Way: protect your base and identify drivers of growth. So this idea that, to me, all of your 0% costs is mostly a protect your base. Mostly, that's from a sales vernacular perspective, that's a feature. That's a fantastic thing. It's not value, as you know, in and of itself, but it starts conversations that you haven't been able to have. Really, no cost. And so now and I think what's really important is the transparency behind it. So there are costs, but there are those that are covering the costs, so your gift can be fully invested. So, and that's all you have to say. You don't have to get any more complicated than that. And I say all that because I lived through, it came into the job just after 9/11, then the hurricanes in Florida, then Katrina and so forth. And nationally, Red Cross and others got on this zero cost thing. And you just have to be careful about it because you can get cornered by it. But I think it helps protect the base. This transformational fund idea, drivers of growth. Every campaign I was ever a part of, I said we need 2 or 3 big drivers of growth. And in today's business model, at least one of them, if not 2 out of 3, need to be completely focused on your mission. So it needs to be transformational in education, in health, in income support, whatever you're doing, because then that helps drive the organization as well. And what I've discovered at all levels that I've worked, people fund big ideas. They want, so larger money and growth is going to come to big ideas. Protecting your base is, there's a whole other series of conversations around that. I watch United Ways that are creating these new social media campaigns and individual engagement, which is fantastic, and their foundation's falling apart. So you have to make sure that the relationship you have with your corporate partners and the donors within those partners and so forth is really solid, and you're treating them the same way, and then you have these areas of growth. Let me say the thing about donor choice, because that's a really important question. That's an important strategic question and a fundraising question. I should scold myself for even using the terms. you know, when working locally, what I said is that we're not going to use the term any more restricted or allocable. So if you use and we all use this in United Way, we say, are those allocable dollars? As if the others don't matter. If you believe that we're in a much more competitive, individual consumer-based environment, then I think the way for us to think is every single gift is designated, is directed. The question is to what? And we have to be very clear about why would you invest in us, and versus what I think has been our history, which is default. Now, I'm not saying, you know, again, the fine line, the nuance is that you're not wanting to get everybody to direct to a particular agency. But one of the things we've learned, I learned it locally, now we've learned it nationally, is that if you give individuals or corporations or foundations the choice between choose the community chest and choose your favorite agency, increasingly they're going to choose their favorite agency. If you say, no, you know, every gift is designated, the mission is impact, we're doing all this great work in these different issue areas, we've got to turn those into products. So there has to be an education product, a housing product, an income product, and then in fundraising and in marketing, if you want to make an investment in the community that does these things, here's what you do. If you want to invest in our education fund, here it is. But it has to be concrete and real. And that becomes a driver of growth. So I think you're thinking about it exactly the right way. Because when I came into the job in 2002, individual designations to particular nonprofit, so a pass-through to a nonprofit versus a gift to an investment fund or an issue fund, had gone up every year nationally, had gone up every year for 13 years in a row, and had gotten to about 27% of total giving to United Way in the U.S. When we made this shift, we collectively, to issues and impact, and then started offering these different choices, 8 or 9 years ago, we stopped that increase in aggregate, increased the amount of money that people have now are investing into education, income, and health products, so that you then, and groups, thoughtfully invest. We call it resources under management. That's now just under $200 million a year, and it's been steady ever since. So the pass-through designation, all money is valuable, but from a business perspective, the pass-through is folks are using us as a commodity, as a, you know, to move money from A to B. It's not that we shouldn't do it. I think we should do it. But we should consider it a service or a feature, not our core value. Long answer to a long question, I know, but it's exactly the right way to be thinking. But the bottom line, protect your base, find 2 or 3 drivers of growth. I think today, 2 or 3 need to be really focused on the impact work that we're doing and being able to, I think, out of the campaign, be able to come back into the shop and say, we got to start talking about that differently. We've got to be able to describe what we're doing out there because it's unbelievably compelling. But people don't understand what we're doing. So you've got to simplify it as you talk about it. Have a good flight.
Thank you, sorry.
All right, floor's open.
I just had kind of a general question. United Way International, United Way America, coming together, United Way Worldwide, what was the thinking, what was your role in that?
Yeah.
And how's it working out?
So, let me, Ben will know this, a few others will know it. I should probably, well, let me just say that, so there were, and Ben was a part of this, because, as we were chatting on the phone the other day, you reminded me that the interactions we had when I was in Columbus and others, that there were United Ways in the 90s trying to figure everything out that we're talking about right now. But we weren't, we weren't getting the kind of leadership that we wanted at United Way of America. And to me, that's always, it's never about the national organization as much. It might be in some regards, but it's because we weren't together as a movement. And I say that to say, when I came in 2002, there was a ton of stuff to get done. I mean, a lot to get done. But within a couple of years, one of the things I realized is that we're going to have to figure out the international piece. United Way International started as an operating division of United Way of America in 1974. 1974. It was, by and large, created because of our relationship with big multinational corporations, Coca-Cola's, who were, you know, increasingly globalizing their strategies, and expats were coming back and saying, why isn't there any United, or they were in country, saying, why isn't there a United Way here? And God, this place needs a United Way. And of course, being the great, you know, saviors that we all are, we said, yeah, that's right, in 1974, and created an international division to license and support United Ways around the world. In '92, during the airmoney scandal at United Way of America, United Way International got thrown over the side with a bunch of other stuff. Spun out as a separate 501c3 independent, worked on contract with United Way of America to license and support United Ways around the world. So we had that relationship. They were in our building. I came in, and among other things, it was more midterm that we were going to have to get to this. But we had unbelievable opportunity outside the U.S. But in the short term, even more importantly, we had unbelievable risk outside the U.S. You know, just to put it in today's, you know, rip the pages from the headlines, the one that scares me to death is our little United Way in Moscow. But we were in places with very little capacity for oversight, for engagement, and so forth, so we had to deal with the risk to the brand first. But there's also huge opportunity to create a worldwide strategy. So we put together, so I'll say this, it's about the mission, and it's about market and brand value. That's why we did it. If we're a genuine, effective, worldwide brand, we're more valuable as a brand than if we're a domestic-only brand. That's one. So if you just care about brand, that matters. Some of the stuff that we're wrestling with in the U.S. from a social change and impact stuff, because there are countries around the world that don't have our history, they therefore don't have our inertia and our baggage. And they're doing some of the most compelling community impact work, so we can learn from them. And then thirdly is, from the U.S. perspective, just say from the U.S. perspective, it was and is and will be increasingly important that we offer not necessarily even giving outside the U.S., but engagement worldwide for corporations, for millennials, for others. And the way, so we merged the two organizations in 2009. We created a single organization and essentially flipped the model. And this one's important, that we had a group of Deloitte Consulting led it. We had a group of volunteers from 13 countries around the world. We looked at all sorts of business and nonprofit models, and I'll just say for myself, I didn't want the UN model or the International Red Cross model, where you had independent countries who were fighting for their interests. So the U.S. could boycott something, Israel could boycott something, and you were locked up. So we extended kind of this franchise model, created a single organization, created a U.S. operating board, created a United Way worldwide board, created a U.S. team, and now hired a U.S. president, but a single organization. And then have signed contracts with, we asked 5 countries to leave. We now have 41 countries, including the U.S., and we now have formal contracts and brand protection provisions and so forth. And we're growing. Last year we grew almost 8% outside the U.S. It's $1.4 billion. Our largest region is Asia. Asia's growing really fast. Great region in Latin and South America. Western Europe's our toughest place. It's for lots of different reasons, but it's going very, very well. And that was the thinking behind it. I think as United Way of America, we're a better organization being part of a worldwide organization, because we've got such a big role and there's such a high expectation of folks to be able to either do U.S. out or outside U.S. in. Sir?
Under your leadership, the turmoil in the United Way of America has settled down. We don't hear any bad news these days. But do you see that there are still challenges to that organization as a national organization?
No, I appreciate you saying that, and it's let me say that there clearly were acute and egregious issues with United Way of America at different times in its history. When I came in 2002, quite honestly, United Way of America from a governance perspective was not the issue. The issue was that we were calling ourselves a single brand, and we really were a federation or confederation of organizations calling ourselves the same thing. So I'll give you a for instance that probably will be close to your heart. The membership requirements at United Way of America when I came in, one of the boxes you had to check said, we have a code of ethics. Okay, check it. When we tightened all the membership requirements a couple of years later and said, we have a code of ethics, and here's how you submit it to us. The number of extensions that were requested at United Way of America was mind-boggling. My point is, when I came in, we had every 6 months local United Ways that were doing something unethical, illegal, or just plain outside the lines. We weren't an enterprise. We weren't. So what we did was we first took care of home. You'll understand everything that goes into this, and probably all of you, given your focus on governance and transparency and so forth. But for the first couple of years, my perspective was zero tolerance. We're going to button this down. We're going to be completely transparent. We're going to be the model for the sector. We're going to start at United Way of America. We had a 47-person board. When I interviewed for the job, and it was representative of the field, I said, we're not doing that. Representative leadership goes away. It's going to be a national board. It's going to be much smaller. It's going to be strategic. It's going to have its own clear conflict of interest policy, ethics policies, and so forth. We're going to lead the way. And then we're going to change the membership requirements for United Way. And the thing I've learned about governance and ethics, and knock on wood, why you don't have the same kind of issues, is you have to change the culture. And I think we've changed the culture across the enterprise. That I remember sitting with our board and saying, as we were changing the membership requirements, that we're requiring you to do things that you never would have given us before. And I've sat in this boardroom, so I get it, even when you look at the dues numbers, like, well, how do you do that? So let alone having to give us paperwork and so forth. What I remember saying is that some United Way, or some United Ways, are going to stick their head up and challenge this. And when they do, we're going to take their head off. And we're going to make them an example. And I said, it can't be Monroe, Louisiana. It has to be a big city. And 2 cities did it. Washington came off the rails, Washington, D.C., and we very publicly called for the removal of the entire management team, the board, and important in Washington, but more important to the network. And then Chicago did the same thing. We had to do the same thing in Chicago. But so we changed the culture, we changed the rules. We started with our own work, and we try to live it. And the thing I've learned about being in this job that I wasn't expecting is I and we are the steward of the brand. And if you're screwing up, that's a big problem. So you got to start there, but you also can't allow anyone else to affect the brand. So we've been, even through the last number of years, we deal with things before you hear about them. And take it seriously.
Other questions? I have one for you. The challenge we see a lot is what society identifies as millennial class, where, I came from an experience of working for a large corporation, workplace, federal deduction. You don't have that a lot today. How are you all addressing that issue and identifying with those people, not only from a giving standpoint, but from a volunteering standpoint?
It's a great question. It's first, the good news is, and as Ben said as we walked in, I forget if you said we're tweeting today but all your social media sites are up there. And I'm serious about this, is that local United Ways working to figure out how do we get to, we'll use millennials, but I think it's even more than millennials. How do we get to millennials through different channels other than their employer is a big challenge. And so there are groups of United Ways and individual United Ways that are experimenting with it all the time. We've just hired a chief strategy officer, first time for that position. He was the head of corporate citizenship at Deloitte. And one of the things he's in that business model is the move to an individual consumer model. So how do we relate to and connect with individuals, and through what channels? And so we're putting together national strategies in terms of technology and strategic partners and so forth, and then working with local United Ways who increasingly are working in groups. Because one of the things that's going to challenge us in again, I'll use millennials, but individuals who use means other than their employer to engage in charity or a United Way or whatever, is that geography doesn't matter as much to them. So you're going across each other's geography all the time when you're tweeting about something. And so we're working with groups of United Ways to try to figure out protocol and value and so forth. So we're spending a lot of time on it. The good news is, if you look at, we always benchmark ourselves as a U.S. movement against Red Cross and Salvation Army. And if you look at market strength, and we measure that, we have an outside firm that measures it, we're all three about the same strength in terms of traditional media. United Way is actually stronger in terms of social media. Our challenge is we're not connected. Because United Ways are out there working in, you all have Twitter accounts, you all have Facebook pages, you're all, you have the Young Leader Societies, and you're using that to engage. So, we've got a leg up. Our challenge now is when is it important to connect the technology, connect the content, manage relationships across geography is what we're working on.
All right, we have time for one more question. Anybody have anything?
I have sort of a hypothetical question, and I don't want you to think that I'm wanting your early demise or anything. That's not what happened. But my question is, in the future, when we're no longer here on this earth, what is your vision for this organization? And I know there's something along the way that you've had that you haven't been able to achieve with this organization yet. How would you like to leave it when you're gone? What's your vision, your dream?
Wow. I think one of the reasons that I've stayed in United Way as long as I have is, and I haven't always practiced this or internalized it, but more often than not I have, is I don't look at United Way like an institution, like an organization. I look at United Way, and I think of United Way as a platform, as a way for people to get together that wouldn't ordinarily get together to try to do something big. And so, to your question about what do I want to leave, part of the disruption that's going on in communities in the U.S. and across the world is we're struggling with how did people's voices get into big decisions. We have, in my view, left the biggest decisions in our communities and in the world just to business and government. Because organizations like United Way are working to try to figure themselves out. But one of the things that makes me nervous about communities all over the world is this lack of community, this lack of is the wrong way to put it, this atrophying of, I'm going to invest in something that's bigger than me. And by doing that, I'll succeed. If my community succeeds, I'll succeed. And I think we've lost a good bit of that. And my hope for this organization is that we become the place where practically speaking, individuals can come and be a part of that. And that so the individual millennial engagement is important from a fundraising perspective, from a brand perspective. It's more important from a community perspective. It's more important that the next generation have places to go where they can act on their aspiration to be part of something bigger that then will change decision making. And this is the closest thing I'll come to a political statement, because I care about policy, I care about decisions made in government of all levels, but I am not partisan, I am not politically engaged because I can't be. I think the only chance we have to break the divide that's growing in our political world is to get people more and more involved, both through their political parties and outside the political parties. That's when political leaders of both parties are going to have to think about community again. And so my aspiration for United Way is that we're seen as the place that you go do that. Not politically, that you go, I care about something big, I want to connect with other people on it, I know where to go. I'm going to United Way. And the great news about millennials as a generation is that they're cause-oriented. They're not the boomers. We were institution-oriented. We wanted to support our nonprofit. We wanted to set up our thing. We wanted to have our, they're more cause-oriented. The last thing I'll say about millennials that I think is important, and it ties to both short-term and long-term, is we talk about millennials like they're out there in ether. You know, they aren't human beings. You know, maybe it's because we're the parents of 2 millennial daughters. They actually are people, and they actually are looking for jobs. And there are millennials at PwC, and at UPS, and at your bank. And so the question is, not all outside, they're all thinking differently, but how do we just connect with them? And when do we do it in the workplace? There's millennials in your labor unions, and shocking. And how do we engage them? How do we engage them? How do they? My hope is that's what we leave, and not an institution that is that's taking some air in the room by trying to raise more money and get better as an institution. If we take care of the other and we become a bigger part of that. And by the way, last thing for sure on that one is what I just said. I say outside the U.S. as well. This is not a U.S. thing. It's not a Knoxville thing. This is a human thing. And it's not to be negative. It's just that it's a disruptive time, and we're having to figure out how we do this differently. If United Way doesn't do this anymore, what is it going to do in order to help create that sense of community? That's what I hope for.
Thank you.
Thanks. We've run over a little bit, but thank you, Brian. Brian, but I thank everybody for coming here today, and I hope to see you at the lunch. We are